Meet the Candidates series. The Arc of Pennsylvania hosts an interview of Alexandra Wisser, candidate for Montgomery County's 147th House District, by Emily Smith, parent, and Heather Myers, parent. The Meet the Candidates series is an opportunity for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities and their families to hear from candidates on disability issues. Candidates from all parties have been invited to participate. The Arc of Pennsylvania is a non-partisan organization and does not endorse political candidates.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Meet the Candidate that the Arc of Pennsylvania has been hosting to meet the candidates who are running for open house and Senate seats. And today we have Alexandra Wisser. She is the Democrat candidate running for the Pennsylvania House 147th District in Montgomery County. She is running to replace retiring Representative Tracy Pennyuk. After working as a conservation coordinator for the Perkiomen Watershed Conservancy, Alexandra became the caregiver of her mother, who was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease and volunteered in other places throughout her community. Some of her key issues are senior care and healthcare costs, livable wage for families, the environment, education, and ending the opioid epidemic. So, welcome, Alexandra. We're pleased to have you. Just a little background, the ARC of Pennsylvania is the state's largest and oldest advocacy organization for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And what makes us even stronger and better is the fact that we have 30 chapters across the state. One of our chapters is here with us today, the ARC Alliance, who is in your area. The other great thing that makes the ARC of Pennsylvania and all of our chapters so strong is that we have family members and individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities involved in our chapters. Our chapter has board members as well as the ARC of Alliance. So I'm going to turn this over today to Jessica, who will be introducing two of her board members or two of their staff members, correct, Jessica? And who will be asking the questions. So welcome, Alexandra.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Jessica Wogman. I'm the executive director at the ARC Alliance. So we are the ARC of Montgomery, Bucks, and Berks. Joined with me today are two parents and two staff members. They're actually both supports coordinators at our agency. So they definitely know the profession and they know it from a personal standpoint too. So I would like to first introduce Heather Myers. She is the mother of Violet. Violet is 10 years old, almost 11 in August, and she lives in Gilbertsville, actually the district that you're running in. She lives with her parents, her siblings, and many pets. You might hear some of them in the background. She also attended Washington Elementary School, and she is now transitioning to middle school east in Boyertown School District. Violet is served by the ARC Alliance, where she receives supports coordination services. Violet was born with Down syndrome and had been diagnosed with an intellectual disability. She was nonverbal until the age of 7, and her family benefited from early intervention services through the Berks IU. Today, Violet is thriving. She enjoys going shopping, getting her hair done, going to eat. She loves live music, kayaking, swimming, and exploring makeup. So she loves animals and she helps out a lot at home with her, all the pets that they have. And one of the newest things she likes to do is she likes to go outside in the evening and watch her chickens go to sleep. So we welcome Heather, and hopefully Violet might pop on if she gets home from school. And then I also want to welcome Emily Smith. She is the mother of Stephen. Stephen is 33 years old and he lives in Phoenixville. He currently works at Ursinus College and he takes a lot of pride in his work and has had a long history of employment. He really enjoys music, movies, attending concerts, and historical sites. Stephen was diagnosed with an intellectual disability and autism at a young age. Stephen received early intervention services as a child, and now he receives supports coordination services through the ARC Alliance. Stephen also is a recipient of one of the consolidated Medicaid waivers, which funds his community living arrangement and provides community participation supports and supports for employment as well. So welcome, Heather and Emily, and I'm going to hand it over to you guys.
Thank you very much, Alexandra, for joining us today and for, listening to us and answering our questions. I am going over to a sheet, so I'm going to be reading off these questions, which are questions we're asking of all of the potential candidates or the candidates for office. So number one is, how will you advocate for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and their families who are on the waiting list for community services?
Yes, and thank you both, Emily and Heather, for participating in this. And I hope there's a little time at the end that I can ask you all a couple of questions as follow-up. But as a representative, my job would be to advocate for everybody in the district, and that includes individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So I think my first point would be that by saying that, I would advocate for the entire community, I also realize that this community is not a monolith. There is not a one size fits all solution for a lot of the issues that you as families deal with, and that you as professionals in this profession deal with. So my top way of advocating would be to, first of all, listen to what the community needs and what the community is experiencing. But first of all, regarding the wait lists, one thing that I would advocate for is a plan to address the direct support professionals crisis that is ongoing, whether it be to increase the incentives for people to enter that workforce and become direct support professionals, to how they are trained so that they can better perform their job, so that they can also then have a better salary and benefits system, so that would also help with the retention, which would then help with the care that they give to the individuals. The other thing would be to advocate for the increasing the number of service providers that are in the community. I've heard stories of parents who, even to get a specialist appointment, it takes a long time. So everything from private to public, county services, all of that, there needs to be increased priority for that. And again, I guess overarching all of this is the fact that the Medicaid system and the waivers are all geared towards institutions and not community-based services and supports, which is so important for your families and the individuals moving forward. And I guess lastly then, that all of this needs to be better organized with input from the intellectual and developmental disability community. Everything right now seems to be very patchwork or not very organized. And I think that would go a long way towards making things more efficient and helping address the waitlist problem.
Thank you very much. The question next is, what investments to expand long-term services and supports in the community for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities will you advocate for? I guess what we're trying to say is how would you advocate for the funding sources? What would you do at the state level there?
Right. I would support legislation that goes towards increasing the workforce for the direct support professionals. I think right now there is one program that I can think of is the proposed Nellie Bly scholarships that students would be able to get this scholarship money if they would go into a healthcare such as a long-term care or home care profession. And so that money then would go towards their education, and they would have to then, in exchange for that, they would need to work and be employed here in Pennsylvania for as long as they had received those types of benefits. I think there need to be incentives that way, as well as increased funding for the community services themselves, whether it be to public and private partnerships, but incentives at all the levels, in addition to advocating at the Fed, using our position as a state representative to try to leverage and work with the federal level, whether it be our senators or our Congress people, so that federal changes can be brought about that would help us at the state level.
One of the things that we've been going back and forth with in the state for 20 or 30 years now, or more actually. Would you please tell us whether you would support closing Pennsylvania's 4 remaining state centers? And if so, what would you think would be the best solution for that?
Right. So I would advocate for them to be closed. I do believe that community-based services and supports are the way that individuals should be allowed to reach their full potential, whether you have a disability or not. And I think that the system that was set up is no longer, I don't know that it was ever actually necessary, but especially now, it is not necessary. And those resources could go towards more community-based care. However, I will say that given the situation with the wait lists and the finite or the lack of resources right now, the way the system is set up, I do believe that there would need to be a plan in place that would address those types of issues, where the residents are now and how they will be transitioned back into the community, where they will live, how they will get the services that they do need, and that doesn't adversely impact individuals that are already on the wait list and are looking for services that they need as well.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you very much. My remaining question is, I think that's my remaining question. No, yes. How will you work to address the shortage of direct support professionals? You've already gone over this pretty well, Alexandra, in your first answer, that you were looking for incentives in order to bring more people into the field. Again, I guess that would include things like trying to get increases in wages.
Yeah,
for
wages, benefits, continued training, and yes.
Thank you, Alexandra. I will send this over to Heather.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Alexandra, for being here and talking with us today. My first question is, what actions will you take to assist in reducing the risk of crimes committed against people with intellectual and developmental disabilities?
Yes, I think first of all, I would want to deal with it in a broad sense that if we are addressing the retention and training of direct support professionals, we can increase the quality of care, of trust that is there between the individual and the professional. So increasing the quality of care and trust, I think, so that there is, and training with the direct support professionals, I think would address an aspect of perhaps the lack or reducing the risk of abuse, and that also that level of trust that if there is an issue going on, that the family can help address it, or that that there are safeguards in place. And then in general, if there is more community support, if a person is has an independent living arrangement, that there's adequate transportation, that there is support for them in the community, so that there is less of a less isolation, I guess I would say, but also that there needs to be training of the police and those in the community so that they're more aware and able to interact appropriately with someone that might have an intellectual development disability, you know, so that they know the right way to handle a situation and not escalate a situation, and that type of thing.
Okay, so my next question for you is, how will you work to ensure the education system in Pennsylvania meets the needs of all children, especially those with intellectual and developmental disability? I know Violet especially enjoys being out with the typical children, doing the typical things, and not so much pigeonholed into a developmental disability group where she's exposed to more people with special needs, instead of learning from her peers of typical.
Absolutely. We have the same situation in Souderton, from what I understand from parents and my experience. I was a cafeteria and playground aide at my daughter's school right before the pandemic hit, and I know from just volunteering in her elementary school that there was quite a bit of segregation going on, and a lack of opportunity then for children, even the way like our playground was set up and things like that. And I don't know how well, no, that's not true. I think as parents, whether our child has a disability or not, I think all parents need to be aware, and not have this ableist default that everyone seems to have. And I don't know, my sister-in-law had a spinal malformation. So she had surgery when she was about 19, and it did not work properly. So she did end up, well, it helped, but didn't. She did end up eventually paralyzed, and she has been in a wheelchair, paralyzed from the waist down since. So there are so many things once you're once you're aware, you can't unsee it. But I think as a state representative, part of our duty would be to make that more visible to people, to try and make them more aware of situations. Even when I go out and canvas, I'll be in developments and I've got to go up a couple steps to get to somebody's door, or their sidewalks are terraced. And I just cringe because I think, these are places that are not accessible to many people. And I don't know that that these types of things need to be addressed going forward. So sorry, I went off on a little bit of a tangent there.
It's nice
But-
that you're conscious of that you actually see that as a inhibition to integration, seeing those steps and knowing that. I feel like that's something most people would not notice.
Yes. And just one other thing, I mean, hotel rooms that they say are accessible. Most of the time they're not. I mean, little things like the amount of room when you put a door in so that you can get the wheelchair through and not crush your fingers. All that stuff needs to change going forward, at least. But back to the school in particular, the IEP process. I don't know how it is for you in Boyertown, but I know in Souderton, sometimes it feels like it can be a battle where, it should be all these people around a table who are advocating for this child. Now you might have different ways of getting there, but that should feel like the direction you're going. And I don't think it always feels that way.
It's what ways will you promote meaningful employment opportunities in your district for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities?
Yes. I would support state, county, public, and private, any kind of partnership that would incentivize, and not just for individuals to be employed with other individuals who have intellectual and developmental disabilities. It needs to be an integrated workforce. And I would also be in support of phasing out the sub-minimum wage certificate, which I'll be honest, until I had gotten the questions and started to look over this stuff, I did not realize that was still even a thing, and it blows my mind. Hopefully we could have a system where that wouldn't be an impact. That whole issue with Medicare having to spend yourself down to zero. I'm dealing with that right now with my father who has dementia. And so that needs to change. It shouldn't be an all or nothing situation. But they also need the support of, if they are in a job that has minimum wage, I mean, they need the same protections. They need the same opportunities. The community needs an awareness, and there should be incentives to integrate the workplace.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
The Meet the Candidates series is an opportunity for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities and their families to hear from candidates on disability issues. Candidates from all parties have been invited to participate. The ARC of Pennsylvania is a non-partisan organization and does not endorse political candidates.